Welcome back to our final night of ghost stories. I hope you've enjoyed the last 2 nights of ghost stories. I have really enjoyed recording them for you. You get one last night of Eyebrowless Caitlin. I noticed as I was editing the last 2 videos that it looks like I don't have eyebrows with this lighting. I do. They're there. Anyway, tonight's last night of ghost stories are stories of places that are a little closer to home to me. It's places that I actually could visit if I wanted to, not giving too much away of where I live, but definitely places I've heard of and could visit, and I hope you enjoy. The legend near Punxsy Hill. The area in and around Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania is undoubtedly famous, world famous in fact. Nary is there a person alive in the United States that hasn't heard of the famous groundhog that, once per year, exits his winter home and is said to predict the coming of spring, or the continuation of harsh winter weather. It's usually the latter. Punxsutawney is hardly known as a paranormal hotspot to all that reside in the moderate-sized central Pennsylvania town. However, there apparently is at least one account of ghostly activity associated with the area just north of Punxsutawney, a legend that has been passed down to at least one continuing generation of a lifelong Punxsutawney resident. Some time ago, I attended a book signing in the town of Brookville, Pennsylvania. While there, I had the pleasure of meeting a very cordial gentleman that asked if I would like to hear a tale of ghostly activity that had taken place in the area of Punxsutawney. Offering that he did not experience the following account on a first-hand basis, he stated that his father had the pleasure of relating the information to him. When he was a mere boy of 16 years of age, Vern Burkhouse had an experience that would stay with him not only to his death, but also would be passed down to at least one more generation of the Burkhouse family. Being a farming family residing near the Punxsutawney area, young Vern had many chores to tend to on a daily basis. One of these tasks that presented itself on a fine spring day was transporting the family's lone bull to another family's farm. In the general area of the Burkhouse farm, there was a lack of bulls that could be used for breeding purposes. So the Burkhouse family took it upon themselves to occasionally loan their lone bull to other farmers that were in need of good, solid breeding stock. One very early morning, after young Vern Burkhouse had traveled to the moderate distance on foot to a neighbor's residence to lead their family's bull back to their farm, a very bizarre episode began to unfold. Not yet being daybreak in the darkness, Vern walked gingerly up a well-used dirt road that led to the Burkhouse home with the bull in tow. Then, as if summoned by some otherworldly force, something stood in his way just ahead of him. However, what stood before him was not something that this earthly existence could muster. Ahead in the darkness stood a girl. However, this was no ordinary female of his day. In the distance up ahead stood a girl in what seemed to him to be a wedding dress. However, this figure was not of this world, but from the one to come, as the eerie glow on her face would attest. This ghostly figure in white simply stood gazing at the young boy while wrapped in a soft, inviting glow. A soft pretzel? Soft, inviting glow. Now in full realization that what he had met in the road was not of this age, but was most undoubtedly a ghostly figure from the past, young Vern Burkhouse began to run. After all, a ghostly face gazing at him in the darkness was all the young boy could take on this early morning. However, as he ran, the boy noticed something a bit peculiar as he again looked in the direction of the apparition. When he slowed his torrid pace some distance away from the specter, the ghostly figure also slowed, seemingly mimicking the young boy's movements. Then, as if he would again begin to quickly move away from the glowing lady, the apparition would simultaneously take up a similar movement as well. While finding this action a bit strange on the part of the phantom lady, the boy continued on. However, as the boy neared a particular area on the road, the ghostly girl in the glowing wedding dress vanished without a trace. After staring at the area in which the ghostly apparition ceased to exist for quite some time, the boy, humbled by his experience with seemingly otherworldly forces, walked home at an extremely brisk pace. Sometime after this highly unusual incident, the young boy completed a bit of investigating concerning the area in which he had experienced something not of this world. It seemed that, several years before his unnerving experience, a girl, apparently on her wedding day, had been murdered by a former boyfriend in the exact area in which the young boy witnessed the glowing figure disappear into nothingness. No other details were given or known during my interview with the son of the young boy that had experienced the strange figure of a woman in her ghostly wedding dress. In an attempt to increase our knowledge of this strange haunting, it was only added that several other individuals that time had also experienced one and same apparition, a ghostly girl attired in an apparent wedding dress that vanished before one's eyes, only to be seen again by the next unlucky observer. One has to inquire the reasoning behind the ghostly figure only being able to proceed to a particular area of the now paved road in which she has appeared to several people. As her life presumably ended prematurely, is she only able to reach the area of road in which she was murdered and exists no more? Because her life, as she knew it, ceased to exist on that exact spot, is she unable to cross that plane of existence, only to, time and again, disappear into oblivion. As this account took place in the year 1916, with the apparition not having been seen by the living of this day, has this ghostly apparition ceased to make her presence known to individuals of this time forever? Has she, after a predetermined stretch of time, been allowed to receive her reward of everlasting life, a life in which she is now at rest with her Creator? To this date, the previous account has been the oldest that has been offered to me as a taste of the afterlife that is to come for many of us. In conclusion, this account shows that time has no bounds. The apparent ghostly realm continues on through time as we know it, and also continues on through time as these apparent spiritual bodies are allowed by God to make their presence known to us in this day and this age, or in an age past, an age experienced by our forefathers. Interesting. I wonder if whenever it's paved, if she's actually standing on the old road that existed, and you can just see like her feet through the pavement where because it's probably above where the old road used to be, like if you saw her today. The next victim, Dubois restaurant hauntings. A middle-aged couple enters a well-known restaurant in the Dubois, Pennsylvania area for an evening meal. While sitting at their booth after ordering, a man in a booth across the way introduces himself. They all begin to enter into light conversation on several topics. However, after the couple receives their food and begins to eat, a quick glance in the direction of the man in the booth, situated only mere feet from them, sits only an empty booth. The man they had spoken to had disappeared. Had he quickly exited the place without their knowing, or was this man something more than a human of this day, waiting for his food order? In the same establishment, a young man enters the restroom facilities to wash his hands before he orders his dinner. As he washes, someone brazenly tells the young man to hurry, as he has been waiting behind the locked door of the restroom for quite some time to use the men's room. Knowing he had only entered this area of the restaurant only moments before, the man opens the door to confront the rude individual, only to find not a soul in sight. Was the irritable voice only a mere figment of his imagination? Was someone attempting to unnerve the man with a simple joke? Or in this dining establishment, Could there be something otherworldly being played out on unsuspecting customers? After speaking with a waitress from the Dubois area that experienced some unexplainable happenings in a restaurant that has since moved to another area of town, the above events might not seem so exaggerated. Apparently, within this building, without any reasonable explanation, glasses would occasionally fall from a rack with no prompting from anyone this side of physical life. Glasses would mysteriously lift themselves, seemingly by their own accord, or ghostly hands, and crash to the floor below. During one particularly unnerving night, while the waitress was speaking with her manager in the kitchen area of the restaurant, a spatula lifted off of another rack and was propelled by ghostly hands at the bewildered manager. Again, no apparent explanation was found for this object defying the laws of gravity and catapulting itself toward an occupant of the restaurant's kitchen. The final happening reported by the waitress was an episode in which a fellow employee claims to have actually viewed what could only be referred to as ghostly apparitions walking within. While cleaning the restaurant late one evening, the employee heard her name being spoken from the dining area. When this person peeked around the corner to see who it was that had entered the place and had spoken her name, the late-night cleaning person became immediately alarmed when she viewed several ghostly people walking down in an adjacent hallway. Obviously viewing something so bizarre and out of place in the middle of the night caused this frightened woman to wish she were not alone, but was instead in the company of several souls walking to who knows where. While speaking to this waitress at a book signing in the Dubois area, no explanation could apparently have been given as to why these spiritual happenings took place in the well-known restaurant. She only left me with the statement that these and other occurrences did indeed play out in the place, with several other people observing them as well. She also stated that there were other strange happenings that took place within the walls of this apparently haunted building. However, the previous ones outlined here were obviously indelibly etched in her mind. As the restaurant moved to another location within the Dubois area several years ago, the crew of this establishment apparently said goodbye to the antics of these lost souls that attempted contact with the unsuspecting workers. These days, only spirits of a liquid type are served within the new surroundings, as opposed to the spiritual souls that attempted to serve themselves a helping of fear within the old haunted establishment. I'm like curious what restaurant that is, because I kind of want to go, and what building it was. That's awesome. Ghostly glow on Interstate 80. Jack Harper of Sioux Falls, South Dakota feels that the stretch of road known simply as I-80 through Pennsylvania is the most haunted highway in the land. This comment is not surprising, since this gentleman was witness to an experience that he cannot explain. A truck driver by trade, Jack has traveled throughout many states in this country as well as neighboring Canada. However, after numerous miles logged in his big rig, this burly trucker was unprepared for what awaited him on this stretch of Pennsylvania highway, a highway known for many sorrowful deaths through the years. On an unusually warm fall evening, Jack Harper was transporting a load of freight through Pennsylvania on his way to Wyoming and was ahead of schedule, so much so that he decided to cruise on this oftentimes picturesque area of the country at a bit slower speed. With windows down and the warm, early fall breeze wafting through his cab, Jack relaxed and enjoyed the open road with few travelers to contend with on his late night. Usually, this highway that separates northern Pennsylvania from southern Pennsylvania is bustling with action. However, Jack had decided that he could log more miles with fewer vehicles on the road at night as opposed to the daylight hours when he would have to contend with many travelers and construction. Not even entering his mind in an even remote way was the fact that the road he was now a part of had been the scene of numerous fatalities throughout the years, deaths that had brought grief to many individuals and entire families. However, in an instant, the thoughts of death on this highway that has claimed so many lives would be an all too familiar reality to this out-of-state trucker. As Jack's rig entered the area of Rockton Mountain, roughly halfway between the Dubois and Clearfield exits of Interstate 80, they have tons of bad accidents during the winter. A strange scenario began to unfold for this trucker, unaware of his oncoming brush with the unknown. On this comfortably warm night within the cab of his rig, the surroundings suddenly changed. As an unwelcome and unsuspected chill enveloped his entire body, Jack Harper's mind sensed the drastic drop in temperature in his cab and immediately closed his driver's side window. Still in awe of the drastic drop in temperature in such a short period of time, he then began to close the passenger side window in his cab when he viewed something that was undoubtedly the reason for the fall in temperature. Inside, the general area of the passenger seat was a glowing white mist. As his mind raced for a logical reason for the haunting scenario before him, the eerie mist continued on with its macabre presence. Realizing what he was in the presence of was by no means normal in the standard of human comprehension. Jack simply drove on while he occasionally turned to view the ever-changing misty form beside him in the cab. After traveling approximately 1 mile with this ominous glowing mass still in tow, the strange mist simply slowly dissipated into nothingness. Also, after its disappearance, the surrounding temperature within Jack Harper's cab again became normal with the outside surroundings. In speaking with Mr. Harper, he stated that he was not at all fearful of the strange misty form that suddenly appeared in his truck, although he still wonders what the glowing misty form might have been. Undoubtedly, considering all of the facts surrounding the apparent ghostly formation that made his or her presence known to this longtime trucker, this glowing misty form was the uneasy spirit of one of the multitude of fatalities that has taken place on this oftentimes lonely highway in Pennsylvania. For Jack Harper, he has, over the years, listened to other potential explanations for this encounter with an unknown soul, a soul apparently not yet at rest. However, logically presented, some of the explanations seem to him, nothing even remotely comes close to having been there, to have seen the unearthly glow that at one time enveloped the inside of his 18-wheeler. Oh, a bit of history. On June 29, 1956, the Interstate Act was passed. The final section of Interstate 80 to be paved was near the PA 153 interchange on June 24, 1970. Total completion of Interstate 80 came about on September 17, 1970. Interstate 80 is the longest east-west interstate in Pennsylvania. Interstate 80 was designated the Z.H. Confair Memorial Highway after the passing of the Name Designation Act of 1984. I've traveled Interstate 80 a lot, and I haven't seen anything spooky except for terrible driving. House of Many Haunts. It seems that an earthbound ghost has the option to use whatever senses it deems appropriate when making contact with the living. The most common type of haunting seems to be auditory in nature when listening to reports of ghostly activity. An unsuspecting person hears something in another room or other area that is vacant, only to find, upon entering the area, nothing to be found. Sometimes I hear ghost pool balls in my basement because we've got a pool table down there, but it's like completely covered with wine making stuff and hunting stuff. And sometimes I swear I hear pool balls like clanging or clanking, but impossible. Usually, in cases like this, the ghostly sounds subside before the person enters the area of the haunting. However, this is only one form of haunting that many individuals experience. Visits from the dead also come in the form of ghostly contact, in the form of a touch or shove or push. Terrifying. Also, the olfactory nerves of smell are not to be left out, as this author has also experienced this form of haunting. Seriously, my perfume addiction, if I were to haunt anywhere, I'd be like smelling like perfume all the time. Last but certainly not the least bizarre form of haunting is the actual sighting of a deceased person. This form of haunting usually enters a person's mind and soul in an all too realistic and striking way. However, not to be left out are the many photographs and audio recordings of specters that grace the pages of books and various websites. While many of these photos and recordings submitted for all to view and hear can be explained as normal phenomena, some truly can't be disproved as ghostly apparitions. A family that resides near the town of Knox, Pennsylvania, has witnessed many of the aforementioned styles of hauntings within their home. Lori Salem, her husband Will, and their children have all been recipients of the many spirits that they claim inhabit their home. Built in the early 1920s, the Salem's home has seen its share of tragedy. In the late 1930s, the original owner of the home was murdered within the confines of the structure before departing for a Christmas party. Before leaving for the party, the owner of the home was in the barn feeding his animals before tragedy struck. While in the barn, the man's neighbor entered the home and shot the man's 14-year-old son in the kitchen. Gross. Seeing this unbelievable scene unfolding before her eyes, the man's one daughter ran out of the house and into the barn to inform her father to what had just happened. Upon entering the house, the father was almost immediately killed by the crazed neighbor in the dining room of the home. After this murder, the young girl ran out of the house and into the family's car for protection from the gunman. The man's wife and other daughter, after viewing the bloody scene, ran upstairs and attempted to barricade themselves in an upper room. Oh man, and in the 1930s, they may not have had a telephone yet in their house. The gun-wielding neighbor then attempted to kill the daughter that had escaped into the car. After shooting through the side window of the auto, the young girl slumped over, apparently dead. However, this brave soul had the presence of mind to fake her death even while being wounded by the man's shot. Oh my gosh. I thought we were reading a ghost story. Gosh. Meanwhile, the mother and her other daughter managed to open an upstairs window, climb onto a porch roof, jump off of the porch to the ground below, and run into the safety of the nearby woods. And then Bigfoot found them and adopted them, and they lived happily ever after. Shortly after these gruesome murders, the man that carried out the evil deeds was apprehended in Seneca, Pennsylvania. After this horrible day of death, the home sat vacant for a number of years. Imagine it. The home eventually was inhabited again and, over the years, had only a small number of families move into and out of the residence. Then Lori Salem, her husband Don, and their family bought the house and attempted to settle into what proved to be a very haunted residence. I thought her... Wait a minute. It says, Lori Salem and her husband Will and their children. And now this is saying her husband's Don. What is going on here? As families move into new places to call their own, an initial adjustment period usually follows that sometimes takes months, if not years, for some families. However, in Lori and Don's case, who the heck's Don? She said Will before. This period of adjustment to their new home and the ghostly presence that co-inhabits their residence continues to this very day. And speaking with Lori, she stated that her family has had so many haunting experiences that she didn't know which happenings to outline first. She did, however, state that the month of August seems to bring with it a sharp increase in paranormal activity. To her, this seems strange as the murders that had taken place so many years in the past happened on December 27th. Could all of the hauntings of their home be the work of the poor souls that so tragically lost their lives on that post-Christmas day so many decades ago? Or are those souls intermingled with others that have owned the property throughout the years? One of the strange happenings that played out in recent times includes the probable visitation of a young friend that only seems to want to play with the Salem's young children. One day, a young neighbor boy came to visit Lori and Don's small child. Salem's child played downstairs while the neighbor went upstairs to play. Shortly after the boy entered the upstairs area, he was seen running down the staircase that led to the rooms downstairs. He called to Lori's son that there was a little boy upstairs and that he wanted to play. Lori's son immediately called to his mother to ask if it was okay to go upstairs with the neighbor and play with what Lori thought might have been an imaginary friend. Lori told the two boys to go upstairs and play, but to come down immediately when she called them, as their lunch was almost ready. After approximately 15 minutes, Lori called the two boys and they promptly entered the kitchen to eat their meal. When Lori asked what had happened to their little playmate, the boys exclaimed that he also had to go home. He was never seen again or heard about again. Before one reasons this potential haunting to a child's near for the fantasy of a childhood imaginary friend, when asked about this possibility, Lori stated that she didn't think that her son and their neighbor were making up the story, as the two boys never talked about their little friend again. Also, during the first 2 weeks of their inhabitation of the home, the family heard many times in the still of the night the sound of a little boy's feet running up and down the upstairs hallway. However, when one would attempt to investigate, not a soul from the side of heaven or the next could be found. What? Yeah, just go play with your ghosts that you don't even know about. Okay, just go play with them, it's fine. Someone or something running in the upstairs hallway at night continued to be a common occurrence in the Salem's home until one late night, after attempting to sleep, Lori entered the hallway, saw nothing, but yelled at the invisible intruder, "I've had it! It's dark! It's nighttime! If you want to run in the hallway, do it during the day when I'm not here!" After this desperate confrontation with what the family believes is the ghost of a little boy, only occasionally unexplained walking is heard by the family at night. Could this restless spirit of a little boy assume that Mrs. Salem is his long dead mother and listen to her pleas for silence? That's funny. The ghost of a young boy is not the only earthbound soul that occasionally makes his presence known to the Salem family. Oh, lovely. An older man has also made his presence known in the form of a very lifelike apparition. Lori's 4-year-old son was playing in the living room while she was again preparing food in the kitchen. Suddenly the son burst into the kitchen and yelled to his mother that there was a strange man in the house. The young boy told his bewildered mother that a man had just come down the stairs and went through the door. After Lori and her husband searched is her husband Will or is it Don? Lori and her husband searched the entire home as well as the entire outside boundaries of their home. They found not a clue to what could have invaded their home. However, when asked what the man looked like and what type of style of clothes the man wore, the original homeowner's daughter stated that the man that the young boy claimed to have seen resembles her father exactly. Once again, could this have been the vivid imagination of a little boy? Too many coincidences prove otherwise. Another encounter with the strange specter of a man happened to Lori in the early morning hours of an August day. While still in bed, Lori heard the distinct sounds of a man talking downstairs. Immediately thinking that the voice must be coming from her husband, readying himself for work, she looked at the clock that sat on her nightstand beside her bed. After seeing that the time was now 7 a.m., Lori immediately thought that her husband should have left for work long before this time, so she decided to investigate the source of the strange voice. After rising from her bed, Lori proceeded down the home staircase and was taken aback to see a man dressed in what appeared to be a baker's uniform sitting on their chair. As their eyes met, the man casually got up and walked out of the room through the kitchen door. Shaking her head in disbelief at what she had just witnessed, Lori ran to the kitchen and found nothing. The ghostly apparition had again made his presence known and had simply vanished without a trace. When asked how many souls the family might have living with them, Lori stated that the family has seen 3 lifelike apparitions, but they believe that possibly 5 ghostly figures inhabit their home. As stated at the beginning of this story that there are various types of haunting presences that one can observe, Lori closed with 2 other unexplainable tales that involve the sense of smell. In her bedroom, she became overcome with sickness one morning after smelling the distinct odor of hairspray that she finds awful. Needless to say, no one in the home uses this brand of hairspray that has been on the market for years. Did one of the spirits use this brand of hairspray when they were alive? Lori stated that she would not have this brand of spray in her home, so what other possibility would there be to explain the ghostly smell? Also, Lori reports, some ghosts from like the 1980s just covered in hairspray for like their big poofy hair and just walked past her and she got a whiff of it. Oh my gosh. Also, Lori reported that recently the strong smell of cigarette smoke has been filling their home even though no one in their family smokes. As with various other encounters that have been reported, Lori and her family feel no threat from the apparitions that make their presence known in their haunted residence. They too feel that the spirits of the long-departed dead mean no harm to their family. In fact, the family feels a protective presence with the new ghostly additions to their family. Lovely. I'm sorry, but the haunting part of this story is her husband Will or is it Don? Three Rivers Sightings. It stood for over 30 years along the banks of the famous rivers in the Steel City as testimony to the greatness of the Pittsburgh sports teams of the 70s. Rising out of the vastness of the city, this gigantic building of light gray concrete and steel held many memories of great Pittsburgh Pirate and Pittsburgh Steeler teams and their players. Stars such as Roberto Clemente and Willie Stargell of the Pirates, Terry Bradshaw and Mean Joe Green of the Steelers were only a few of the memorable names that have been etched into the memories of all that frequented this shrine of greatness in the 70s. I watched whenever they imploded the stadium. This story of Pittsburgh sports greatness began with the opening of Three Rivers Stadium on July 16, 1970. As it began its life in the city, nary a soul would dream of the bright future of the Steelers and Pirates that would play out in this field of dreams. Then, after 30-plus years of sports played within its walls, this shrine to the greatest of Pittsburgh sports personalities was unceremoniously imploded in very early 2001. Yeah, I remember watching that on television. I mean, PNC Park's beautiful, just saying. Gone were the days of screaming crowds as the Steelers and Pirates notched numerous championships into the history of their respective leagues. Gone also were the players that made up these memorable collections of highly talented squads. Now only memories of better days when the late great Roberto Clemente and Willie Stargell roamed this field and instilled pride and awe of the fans that made their way to these hallowed grounds of Pittsburgh sports, are remembered by fans that at one time had filled the seats of Three Rivers Stadium. Along the banks of the three great rivers, the Monongahela, Allegheny, and Ohio, now sit two modern parks that many may never live up to the greatness of what was one of the nicest stadiums in the history of sports. Hey, PNC Park is nice, okay? However, in addition to the many sports stories written about it when it still stood along these rivers, banks, it has been reported that a ghostly presence also roamed these hallowed halls and corridors. Legend has it that, at one time, a fan was brutally murdered within the confines of the stadium. After this episode had come to its grim conclusion, this unfortunate soul was said to have stayed to inhabit the area in and around the stadium. Murdered. How true is this legend? Unfortunately, one cannot investigate the claims that swirl of a full-bodied person haunting the stands, field, and tunnels of the great stadium, as the sports facility no longer exists. I mean, they could still be on the grounds, though. There was, however, at least one confirmed death that took place within the walls of Three Rivers Stadium in the years that it stood. In the early days of the stadium, a fan attempting to tempt fate jumped from a concrete walkway, railing, partition in an upper deck of the stadium. This undoubtedly was an attempt by this person to land on the lower deck and exit the area more quickly than his friends. Unfortunately, he did not reach his intended target and fell to his death, landing on Pirate player Ramon Hernandez's parked car below. Oh, crunchy crunch. The foolish person's attempt to quickly exit the stadium by jumping onto a lower level walkway had failed. Obviously. Could this have been the soul of the unfortunate person that had been seen at varying areas of the stadium? Instead of the doubtful story of the murdered fan that was outlined earlier in this account, this would seem to an observer of the history of the stadium a more likely scenario. Also more likely to be seen as spirits within the historic structure, as opposed to the person's supposed murder within, would be the possibility of players that at one time starred with the Pittsburgh sports teams that are no longer with us. As they achieved greatness and obviously had memories of these times etched into their consciousness, did they choose to move on to their heavenly reward? Or would they remain in this era to mentally relive the past that had so much love and admiration in their lives? Where Three Rivers Stadium once stood is now a simple lot that offers space for fans to park or tailgate before they make their way to one of the Pittsburgh's two newest facilities, Heinz Field or PNC Park. The area where one-time great individuals plied their trade has now been recreated as an unusually meager testimony to the greatness that had been accomplished there. Unfortunately, the shrine of greatness that at one time was the Three Rivers Stadium has moved on to that great stadium in the sky. Has the person or people that were said to have haunted this sports complex also moved on to a new life? Or, on any given night, is it still possible to view a person from the somewhat recent past, but not of this dimension, still searching for the glory days of a time gone by? Alright, I'm gonna add these last two stories, which are actually from my town, so I'm gonna try and edit out the names, just so you can't find them, but since it's the last night of ghost stories, I figured I'd throw them in. Famous Caitlin Town Haunts. Trick, treat, or truth. For Caitlin's University of Pennsylvania, students ask themselves every October. A professor at Caitlin's University, along with the help of the University History Club and Phi Alpha Theta History Honor Society, hosts the annual Caitlin's University Ghost Experience, where students gather to hear stories and the legends of haunted buildings on campus. In previous years, this professor has brought in paranormal investigations teams such as Rogue Paranormal based in New York to find any evidence they possibly can to prove the legendary ghosts of Caitlin's town. The investigation brought new life to the ghost experience. There were photographs of orbs and unusual figures along with EVPs that were amazingly clear. Also, video footage gave chills to the audience as an unexplainable shadow would swoop across the screen. The tales involved many buildings on campus, and the most chilling story took place in the very building in which the presentation was held, which is a chapel on campus. I've been to this. I think I went like 3 or 4 times. Fantastic. Also, in this chapel, they would have classes, and a lot of times the electrical equipment, like PowerPoints and stuff, would just stop working during people's lectures. The chapel was a building of all trades, from a church to a theater to a memorial building for passed-on university staff, and now an auditorium classroom. The building is very old in appearance, a true piece of Caitlin's University's history. Legend and history, for that matter, have it that when the chapel was a theater, sometime in the 1900s, a man named William was in town to perform his screenplay at the chapel. William performed one night, and the audience thought it was horrible. They booed him off stage and criticized him. The story goes on. Later that night, after his extreme embarrassment, he broke into the chapel and committed suicide. He tied a rope to one of the rafters on the ceiling and hung himself from the top balcony into the middle of the building. But William messed up. His rope was too long, and instead of just suffocating, when he pushed off and hit the middle, his head popped off and landed on stage. William is said to haunt the chapel to this day. The building has very much activity that can be unexplainable. There are random air drafts that run through the building, unexplainable noises, and random shadows appear. The most chilling aspect of William is, although the wood of the stage has been replaced many times since his suicide, there is an apparent dark stain in the same spot where it is said to be where William's head landed. Other chilling stories on campus include those of some of the dorms. Wilkinson Hall, which is now a co-ed dorm, underwent a fire somewhere between the 1970s and 1980s that took the life of a girl. The story says that the girl was found burned to death in her bed, lying down as she was sleeping. Activity in the hall includes unexplainable noises, shadows, and misplacement of items. Another very haunting and unpopular story around the town is the ghost of a different hall. Just like the chapel, this hall has gone through phases as a dining hall as well as an all-girls dorm. In the tale, there was a little girl kidnapped and murdered by one of the male cafeteria staff when the hall was in its dining hall stage. It is said when the little girl went missing, all they found of her was her bloody clothes in an elevator shaft of the hall. It is now speculated that the murdered girl and the cafe worker haunt the building. Activity includes strange noises such as a child playing in shadows, as well as misplacement of items. As an older university, Caitlin's University has chilling stories of paranormal activity that students experience often. Information about evidence gathered by Rogue Paranormal as well as EVP and photo evidence can be found on their website. Blah, blah, blah. Alright, here's another building in my town. And continuing with our recent theme of Caitlin's town hauntings, in addition to the numerous Caitlin's University ghost sightings, there is also at least one privately owned business that is purportedly haunted as well. The house, an older structure as compared with the many newer buildings in the area, is owned by a family of Caitlin's town. This one-time fraternity house turned business has quite an extensive history of haunting activity within its walls. The home, constructed in the year 1904 by a family, was the residence of the one-time part owner of the now defunct hardware store formerly located on Main Street in Caitlin's town. In the early 1960s, the home was purchased at auction by the Theta Chi fraternity, or is it Theta Chi? Probably Theta Chi fraternity. For a fairly brief period of time, another fraternity on campus inhabited the home until the Theta Chi fraternity again made their way into the structure. Low membership in the 2000s, as well as certain internal problems within the fraternity, forced Theta Chi to withdraw their charter for the Caitlin's Town fraternity. One of my cousins, like my older cousins, has like memories of being like a little sister of a fraternity and going to this house. After the withdrawal of the charter, the structure sat vacant for approximately 2 to 3 years before it was sold to the people who own it now in October of 2005. Opening for business in the borough of Caitlin's Town in May of 2006, the one-time home is now known for its immense inventory of used books, antiques, and collectibles, literally 3 floors of something for everyone, and its ghostly activity. Yeah, it's really cool. I've been in there. It's like stuffed with books and things. While it sat as a fraternity house, the building was seemingly inhabited on occasions by a supernatural visitor or visitors. In the off-season for academic studies and occasional frivolity, the vacant fraternity house was often visited by fraternity brothers to ensure the safety of the structure's contents. One afternoon, a brother walked a short distance to the frat house to conduct a check of the building. However, upon entering, this bewildered young man was met with something seemingly not of this dimension. As he listened intently, he could hear a commotion in an upstairs room. Loud music and individuals powerfully carrying on a conversation met his thoroughly confused ears as he stood quietly on the ground floor of the home. Immediately assuming that members from this fraternity had planned an unannounced party without his knowledge, the now jubilant fraternity member quickly climbed the stairs that led to the rooms above in an attempt to join in on the fun. However, as his feet touched the first step that led to the 3rd floor, all became hauntingly quiet in the rooms above. Immediately realizing that he was now all alone in the building with an apparent ghostly party breaking up, while he listened on, the now petrified young fraternity member scampered down the flights of stairs and exited the building in a hurried dash. Another instance that, in days past, played out in the historic building came about when members of the fraternity lived in the building. In the dead of night, as a fraternity brother attempted to sleep on the 3rd floor of the home, he was awakened by what he assumed was a roommate creating havoc by clumsily rearranging his CDs. What the heck are those? Spooky. With eyes still closed, the annoyed member of the house became even more agitated and decided to reprimand his roommate with an angry outburst. However, as he opened his eyes, fully expecting to view his roommate tossing his CDs to the floor, the student was shocked to view no one in sight. No one from his side of humanity, at least. What the frightened individual viewed as he looked on was his CD cases strewn about the floor of his room with no one in sight to blame the deed on. Apparently, an unseen hand or hands took it upon themselves to haunt this young man attempting to sleep in his 3rd floor room. Considering the numerous amounts of college students that have entered this building throughout the years, could the energy left behind by a former resident or two still reside in this old building, or of the former owner and builder of the structure? Or, now that the parties that at one time were most undoubtedly commonplace with the building have ceased, could the spiritual residue that was expended at such gatherings be still left to linger within the walls of the structure? One final instance that I wish to outline concerning this house was offered by one of the present owners of the business. Alone on the 2nd floor of the building, the owner was astonished to hear the floorboards above her on the 3rd floor squeaking as she tended to arranging items on the 2nd floor. Undoubtedly thinking of other incidents that had played out on the floor above in years past, this person decided not to tempt fate and instead thought rationally about what the sounds above her head might be. She moved her feet in an attempt to mimic the sounds that she had just witnessed. Although the owner heard a sound similar to the one she had witnessed on the above floor when she now moved about, the movement in question definitely had come from above and not from her walking on the floor that she occupied. Not wanting to venture to the 3rd floor in an attempt to discover what had made the sounds of an apparent person walking across, she exited the house in an attempt to see if there were any tree branches that might be touching an area of the house, thus producing the menacing noises. However, as she looked on in disbelief, the owner found that there were no branches from the trees surrounding the property touching any area of the structure. To this day, all of the incidents that happened on the 3rd floor of this business have yet to be solved. Could there be also, this business is right across the street from a church. Could there be rational explanations for these and other incidents that have taken place in this one-time frat house? Or is there something a bit more otherworldly taking place in this popular business? Quite possibly a presence that refuses to close the book on his college days at Caitlin's University. If you were ever in the picturesque town of Caitlin's Town, Pennsylvania, and are in the market for some quality merchandise, please visit this house. However, as you proceed to the 3rd level of the establishment, please be aware that you just might be entering the abode of something or someone not of this age. As you view your surroundings, quite possibly you will also encounter something that wishes to reach out to members of today's society in all too haunting way. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed these 3 days of ghost stories. I really enjoyed recording them, and I look forward to seeing you back tomorrow. Who knows when I'm going to stream, but I look forward to seeing you in the next stream. And for now, have a good night.